Now, back to the reasons what led to Sturm und Drang. It was pietism, Klopstock, Shakespeare, and Rousseau. Klopstock was the pioneer of Sturm und Drang. Shakespeare was a great influence, and Rousseau, we can say, he is the father of Sturm und Drang. Remember, for Enlightenment, René Descartes was the father of Enlightenment, and we can say Rousseau is the father of Sturm und Drang. So what is Sturm und Drang? This is the name of a literary period, and it was a short period, 1770 to 1784, about 14 years. Sturm und Drang is the German word, and it means in English either storm and stress, or storm and push, or storm and urge. So storm and stress is the most common translation. And it's actually, I don't like any of these translations because the word storm is actually clear. It means storm, but the word Drang comes from the verb drängen, and drängen means to move, to push forward, and stress means tension. So it's not really the right translation because Drang is actually like pushing forward. So therefore, I would like you to keep the German term Sturm und Drang. So please remember this word. It's a new term that you learn, which is very, very important period in the German literary history. And it's also important to note that it only took place in Germany, and it was influenced mainly by the works of young writers. And these young German students in the years of 1770, 71, they gathered in Strasbourg, and among them was the very young Goethe. And they began this Sturm und Drang movement and wrote the major literary works of that period, mostly dramas and poems, but also prose works, such as Werther. And the group comprised the leader, Johann Gottfried Herder. He was the leader of the group. And other writers were Goethe, Klinger, Bürger, Voss, and Hölty. It was Klinger who coined the term, the name of the movement. Friedrich Maximilian Klinger was the writer who gave the name Sturm und Drang, and we need to know why. This is because he wrote a drama called Wirrwarr, which is translated into English as something like The Mess. And this drama is about very stormy passion love story of a young man and a young woman, somewhat similar to Romeo and Juliet, and the parents are against their relationship. So it's a very passionate love story, but at the end they did not kill each other. Instead, they emigrated to America. So remember, this time, 1776, is also the time of the Declaration of Independence in the US. And this is why in the end of the story of Wirrwarr, we have the couple emigrating to America instead of killing each other. So the name then was changed into Sturm und Drang. And then the literary movement was given this name, but it actually comes from this drama written by Klinger. So at the same time, the famous works such as Goethe's Götz von Berlichingen and The Sufferings of Young Goethe and Die Räuber from Schiller. They were the works that fired a broadside against all values of the Enlightenment. It was like an open intellectual rebellion. So we can say that Sturm und Drang was an emotional counter-movement to the rational Enlightenment. It was like a response to the age of Enlightenment. And they developed new literary forms and expressions, and they tried to combine reason and emotion. It's not that they wanted to get rid of Enlightenment, but they wanted to combine reason and add emotion to it. What is very interesting about this movement was this term Gefühlsüberschwang, which means too much feelings in excess or excessive feelings. So you can see that it was Empfindung anstatt Vernunft, which means sensation or sentimentality or sensitivity rather than reason. Those of you who are learning German, please learn these words because these are very important terms. And it was Gefühl anstatt Verstand, which is Gefühl is feeling and Verstand comes from verstehen, which is to understand, but Verstand here means reason or your mind. So it was feeling is more important than reason. And reason comes from the word ratio in Latin. So in Werther's plot we see that all of the plot is irrational actions. So the opposite of the Enlightenment. So the big motto was sensibility rather than sense. And we see in Werther, so sense is stands for enlightenment and sensibility stands for Empfindsamkeit or Sturm und Drang. You see in Werther that he tells of his feelings and experiences and he lives according to his heart and he describes his own emotional world, and the letters that he writes are very strong in expressions. He writes his friend Wilhelm about his experiences in a feeling surplus, Gefühlsüberschwang. And this was characteristic for this time, which develops out of love from natural experiences. So when you read Werther, you feel it's very personal, very subjective. Subjectivity is another big term for this period. So Werther is a typical representative of sentimentality because he writes emotionally. He shows in his letters strength and individuality. So Werther is a cultural work. It was the key novel of Sturm und Drang. This is a picture of Werther kissing Lotte in the final scene. Famous image. So the Sturm und Drang period was also referred to as die Geniezeit, the genius time. Concept of genius is born in a storm and anger. It emerged in a storm. That's why the term Sturm und Drang. So the genius means that an artist who is only bound to his conscience and his own aesthetic claims. So no set of rules can limit his creative activity. The genius can find everything in his own soul and his own feelings. So he is vital and powerful. The ideal is by no means the sensitive loner, but a genius was a large, independent individual who only followed his own rules and who bravely rebels against the authorities. So no need for rules for the creation of art. The genius creates from experience, not adhering to rules. And the inexhaustible creativity of the genius can transform his feelings into art. And the great examples, or the imagery of such a poet, was seen in the great examples of Homer and Shakespeare. The literature of Sturm und Drang placed the subject and his passion in the center. And the most important concern of Sturm und Drang was to create new standards of dealing with the genuine feeling of life, of nature. So the individual comes to the fore, and the genius is celebrated. Self-realization is the goal, and the poet and the artist is regarded as the ideal. So the works of Sturm und Drang period broke with, for example, in drama. So they have three different types: drama and prose and poetry. In drama, they broke with the traditional unity of place, time, and action. And this was a break that Shakespeare had already accomplished 150 years earlier. The classical verse is given up, and the dialogues are written in the prose form. And in poetry, the lyrics were turned to the folk song and all that was perceived as natural. There was more love and nature poetry, and the free poet and the genius could express his original feelings unrestrained and free of courtly rules and strict metrics. And there was also a preference for ballads, which is lively and direct in style, and natural motifs are often derived from legends and legends of the simple country population. And in prose, Werther is probably the most famous literary figure of Sturm und Drang, and Goethe's work became a great success shortly after its appearance all over Europe. So, briefly, comparison between Aufklärung und Sturm und Drang. Aufklärung, argumentative and temperate language, clear structure, drama structure. Literature should make people moral and promote their rational action. You can see that in Nathan the Wise and Emilia Galotti, typical Aufklärung dramas. And in Aufklärung, the drama should instruct and delight, coming from the term prodesse et delectare, Latin word. However, Sturm und Drang was quite the opposite. It's like the pendulum was going to the other side of the spectrum. It was against all the rigid guidelines. Why? Because a gifted person does not need rules to create high-quality literature. This comes up in Werther a lot. He talks about it. Independence of the writer. So he puts his own experiences and feelings to the fore. That was important. And Sturm und Drang writers also criticize absolutist rulers, just like the Enlightenment, social order, narrow bourgeois morality and convention, and obsolete convention in art and literature. And also he criticized the one-sidedness of the Enlightenment.